This coffee pot is made out of pewter, a mix of metals that's sometimes called the poor man's silver, because it costs about half as much as real silver, while still delivering a high polish and shine. But if there's no silver in pewter, how exactly does it get its silvery luster? Making pewter coffee pots starts with melting down bars of pewter to cast the solid parts of the pot. The handle you hold when you pour the coffee, and the decorative knob or finial you use to lift up the lid. Pewter is made up of about 90% tin, a silvery gray metal that looks a lot like silver and is highly resistant to tarnish, so the coffee pots will polish up and hold their shine. Along with the tin, there are small amounts of other metals in the pewter, including copper and bismuth, and an element called antimony to strengthen and harden the pewter. To cast the pewter into the solid parts of the pot, it's heated to 430 degrees to melt it into a molten state so it can be poured into the center of a mold inside a casting machine. The machine takes the mold for a spin at 750 revolutions a minute. The centrifugal force pulls the melted pewter to the outer edges of the mold and into cavities to form the parts. This mold makes the finials, or knobs. After just a few minutes, the finials can be popped out and snapped off the pewter spokes that hardened in the channels. The spout is cast out of the same molten pewter. But if it were simply poured into a mold, the spout would be a solid piece of pewter with no place for the coffee to pour out. To get a hollow spout, the pewter is poured into a rotating brass mold that's tilted to pour out the excess pewter just a split second after it's poured in. The brass mold is cooler than the molten pewter, so the pewter closest to the brass cools and hardens on contact to form a pewter shell inside the mold. The rest of the pewter doesn't have time to cool before the worker tips the mold. It quickly flows out, leaving behind a hollow pewter spout. The pot part of the coffee pot is made out of a flat pewter disc, 12.5 inches in diameter, that's pressed into a series of dies to squeeze the disc inward and stretch it upward into a narrow pewter cylinder. Here, you can see how the pewter stretches as the 30-ton press forces it into one of the dies. It takes a succession of 5 dies to stretch the flat disc into a cylinder 7 inches tall. To add stylish curves to the coffee pot, the plain pewter cylinder is shaped on a lathe, a machine that spins the pot while a worker presses into the pewter with steel tools. The shape comes from a mold, or chuck, that's placed inside the pot before it goes on the lathe. The tool presses the pewter into the mold until the pewter takes on the same shape. A cutting tool on the lathe trims the lip on the top of the pot to make it even and smooth all the way around. Another tool folds over the lip into a bead to complete the pot. The pots are then drilled with small holes where the spouts attach so the coffee can pour out. Then, the coffee pots are assembled. The base goes on first, followed by the handle and spout. A tin-based solder bonds the parts together tightly and makes a watertight seam between the spout and the pot so no coffee leaks out. The finishing touch is the finial and hinge that's soldered to the lid to complete the coffee pot. To bring out the silvery luster of the pewter, a worker buffs it with cotton buffing wheels and some jewelry polish. Every inch of the coffee pot is polished until it's so shiny you can see your reflection. And this pewter pot is ready to serve up a hot cup of joe.